Hi, it's Erin from knitlove.com, and today I'm going to show you how to do a 3-needle bind-off. 3-needle bind-offs are great for joining shoulder seams or any horizontal to horizontal seam that you might have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use the stockinette as my right side, and I've got 2 pieces of knitting on 2 separate needles. So I'm going to join my 2 right sides together so that they're facing each other. So I've got the wrong side facing me and the wrong side of the second piece facing out as well. Go ahead and line up your stitches. Normally what I would use is I'd use my tail yarn to go ahead and go back over this and bind off. It just creates less weaving in at the end, and it gives you a good opportunity to use a bit of yarn that you have hanging off there. But today, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and use this red one so you can see what I'm doing. I kind of like that. So to do a 3-needle bind off, what you're going to do is you're going to take your 3rd needle and you're going to slip through the first stitch on your front needle as if to knit. And then you're going to do the same thing on the back needle. You're going to slip through the first stitch as if to knit. And then take your working yarn and draw it through both loops. And slip it right off. So I've got 1 stitch on my right-handed needle now. Go ahead and do the same thing through the front and the back as if to knit. Pull your yarn through both. And now you've got 2 stitches on your right-handed needle. Now, using standard bind-off technique, go ahead and slip the first stitch over top of the second one. And then basically from there it's just a repeat. So front and back, slipping through as if to knit, pulling your yarn through, and then binding off. Some other ways you may be familiar with finishing a shoulder seam or horizontal to horizontal seam is to use a Kitchener stitch, or to bind off both pieces and then go ahead and manually seam it with a needle afterwards. The advantage to a 3-needle bind-off is that a 3-needle bind-off has more structural integrity than a Kitchener stitch, which creates no seam at all, and is less work than seaming off both sides and then manually stitching it together. It's actually one of my favorite techniques. If you tend to bind off quite tight, go ahead and use a larger size needle in your right hand, and that will create a looser bind-off. You want your bind-off to be about the same gauge as your knitting so that it doesn't pucker or pull at the seam. You want a nice tight seam that doesn't pull. It can be a little awkward holding 2 needles in your left hand at first, but it actually goes pretty smooth, and it's not a very difficult technique. So as I'm coming to the end here, it's the same all the way through. The last one is done the same as the first. I'm going to drop my needle here. You can see I've split my yarn. I'm just going to go ahead and tuck that back up. And then just pulling over. If your yarn is attached to a ball, go ahead and just cut this, but mine is short enough that I can just pull this right through. And you can see that a 3-needle bind-off creates a nice knit stitch right along this top edge here, and it holds your 2 pieces together. So here's what it looks like from the back side. It creates a little seam along the back there. And if I flip this over, I'm going to get rid of these needles just so you can see. If I flip this over, you can see it creates a nice seam along the front edge. You can see that this red pokes through just a tiny bit here. But of course, if your front and your back were the same color as the yarn that you were using to do your stitching, your 3-needle bind-off, you wouldn't see it at all. So this creates a nice sturdy seam. And that is how you do a 3-needle bind-off.